Hi, Sean.
Hey Tio, how you doing?
How's it going?
Good, good. Here, let me open you up here. There we go. Cool.
Awesome. Would you please introduce yourself for audience?
Yes, of course. So my name's Shawn Hudson. I'm the senior escrow officer and branch manager at One Key Escrow in Northridge.
Awesome. And would you please kind of explain us like the escrow process and when do we need the escrow for?
Okay, so you'll need escrow anytime you're involved, obviously, in a real estate transaction where there's a buyer and a seller. You'll also need an escrow company if you're handling a refinance, where you're refinancing your property. Basically, what we do is we act as the neutral third party between the clients, and we also kind of are like the shepherds of the transaction, where we kind of pull everybody along, make sure that the buyers are adhering to their contractual obligations, the seller is adhering to their contractual obligations, and holding the funds until all those contractual obligations are met between the parties.
Gotcha. Okay, awesome. And what areas do you service usually?
We can service all of California, but primarily, Southern California, San Fernando Valley, the beach cities, Torrance, Redondo Beach.
Gotcha. And let's just say a client is out of state or out of town for during that transaction. Is there anything we could do about it?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, as opposed to many years ago where we didn't have the benefits of DocuSign. Now with DocuSign, we DocuSign most of our opening packages to the clients, so that way they can go through at their leisure, complete the package, and then once they're done, they don't have to mail anything back to us. We get that back electronically, and then all they have to do is what we call our wet sign package, which is the tax documents and the grant deed. Get that signed and notarized, and if they need help in obtaining a notary, we have nationwide services that can go out and meet with them to take care of that for them.
That's great. Awesome. Is there a situation like a difficult customer situation that you can kind of share with us and how you resolved it?
Well, so most issues that they're, on in a real estate transaction, as far as things that are, difficult, is when you either have titling issues on the seller side, or, if they have many, liens or loans that need to be paid off, if they've gone through forbearance. Sometimes getting those demand statements can take quite a while. I had a situation, and this is where, for any agent out there, before you go on a listing appointment, always order a preliminary title report. So that way you know who your parties in the transaction are. I had a transaction where it was an outside agent that we were handling. One of my agents represented the buyer, brought in this transaction to our office. The seller thought she was on title, and what had happened was, unfortunately, the whole point of vesting is what happens to the property if somebody should pass. And what had happened is this gentleman was an individual, unmarried man. He then passed away, and his son, not knowing that he didn't deed his property into his trust, then deeded the property from the trust to the mom, and then the mom deeded to her trust, but there was a break in the chain of title because the dad never deeded it into his trust. And what happens there is, unfortunately, they have to go to probate and request what's called a Hegstad petition. And those Hegstad petitions can take 8 to 10 months to work through the court process so they can ultimately perfect title to sell.
Got it. Yeah. Geez, that was terrible.
Yeah.
So, would you please kind of like walk us through the escrow process? Let's just say I'm a seller. What are the process? What are the steps?
Okay, so obviously the first thing that's going to happen is the buyer and the seller, they're going to, execute a purchase agreement. Once that purchase agreement is executed, that's going to come to me, where we do our data entry process, and then we start sending out emails and phone calls to the client saying, okay, if your property's in Los Angeles, for example, we're going to need to order a 9A report. So the first thing that we're going to do for that seller is send them the application, and then additionally a credit card application, so that way we can remit that to the city so they can start processing that report. When we order them online, they usually take 5 to 6 business days. If a client doesn't like to give their credit card, then we have to order them by mail, and those can take 14 to 20 days to come back to us. So we always suggest ordering it via online using the credit card, because that's a contingency, right? So the longer it takes, then that's the longer the buyer can hold up on getting their contingencies in escrow. So we send that out first. Then while that's coming in, we're also working on getting the buyer's deposit in. Once their deposit comes in, then we actually type and prepare escrow packages for the buyer and the seller. We're going to ask for loan information and from the seller. There's a bunch of, several tax documents that they have to complete, whether it's their primary residence, not primary residence, to determine whether or not they're subject to any sort of withholding for the state of California. They're going to tell us, who their payoff lender is. So they're going to complete a variety of documents for us. Once that comes back, unless there's any amendments and things that get drafted during the course of the escrow, it's pretty passive on the seller's side, unless we're having a hard time getting a demand statement or a payoff for their loan. But once they provide that information to us, we then order the payoff demand. So that way we can, have an idea of what they owe at the close. We can provide them then with a better estimate, so that way they know if they're moving into a purchase transaction, what they're going to come out to put in potentially into their new property. While that's going on, we're also working with the buyer side, making sure the lender has all the documents that they need in order to get the buyer's loan documents. So ultimately we can get those docs signed, fund, and record the transaction.
Got it. Thank you. And my last question here is, how do you stay on top of the laws and regulations? Like, what kind of trainings do you do, or how do you stay on top of it?
So thankfully, our industry, we don't have a ton of laws that change that we have to deal with. It's more disclosures, right? As new disclosures come about, we have to, be on top of those, either, through our affiliated real estate agents and brokers. Our licensing, okay, we're licensed by the Department of Financial Protection and Innovation, which for a buyer or a seller is like the strictest level of licensing. So every staff that works in a DFPI escrow office gets a background check, fingerprint, DOJ, Department of Justice background checks, to make sure that we're able to safely handle the funds, because we do have a fiduciary responsibility to the clients to protect their money.
Got it. And that fiduciary duty is for both of them, right? The buyer
Yes, buyer and the seller, correct.
Got it. Okay, awesome. Anything that I missed that would like you would like to share?
So, a couple things that I always, like to have agents check on for their buyer or their seller when they start getting into an escrow transaction. Find out where your clients are going to be. People take vacations, people go out of town, and you'll be surprised how many times a buyer decides that they're going to plan a vacation and go out of town that last week of escrow. So we need to know whether or not we need to prepare power of attorneys for them. Are we going to be dealing with an out-of-state mobile notary situation, or even possibly an out-of-country notarization thing? And, getting appointments at the consulate, you can't just walk in. Some consulates have 2-3 week wait times to be able to make an appointment. So just knowing, it helps us with the logistics of the transaction to make sure that we can get everything signed and returned timely for closing.
Got it. Well, awesome. Thank you so much for your time, Shawn.
No problem. Thank you.
Have a great day. Bye-bye.
You too. Bye.